But operant conditioning, we're going to get into operant conditioning, and this is just learning through our consequences. So operant conditioning occurs when a behavior is, I don't want to say associated. We're going to change that. Ignore this right now. Okay? So operant conditioning occurs when a behavior is succeeded with a significant event. So is it going to be reinforced? Do we want the behavior to occur again? Or is it going to be diminished or punished? Are we trying to stop the behavior? So in this picture, you see there's a rat, and it's in this really horrible picture of a Skinner box. Well, what a Skinner box was B.F. Skinner decided he wanted to see if he could train animals to do certain tasks. And so for the Skinner box, he was seeing if he could get the rat to do things like push this response lever. So each time that the rat was in the box and it pushed the lever, there would dispense a food pellet. Well, eventually, they'd also incorporated other things like, see how it says electrified grid right here? He would also test to see if he could, this sounds horrible, electrocute the animals and to see if they would push the lever to stop the electricity. So again, this is kind of confusing the way I'm going to explain it, but bear with me. So the electrified grid is an unpleasant thing happening to the animal. They know that by pressing the lever, that grid will turn off. That is going to reinforce their behavior because we want them to push the button to get rid of this unpleasant thing. So again, it's taking away something they don't want so that they can continue the behavior. So that is negative reinforcement. We're taking away something they don't want to continue a behavior. And we're going to get into this more on the next page because I think this chart will really help you picturing it. So with positive, think of positive and negative in terms of math. Think of it as a mathematical equation. Just are you adding something or taking away something? And whether you add or take away something, it's going to depend on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to increase a behavior or decrease a behavior. So reinforcers increase a behavior and punishers decrease a behavior. So maybe you've heard of punishment, like some people have gotten a video game taken away from them, for example. Well, you're taking something away because you want them to stop doing a certain behavior. That's negative punishment. And I'm going to give an example of each because I feel like this could be a little hard to understand. But if we want to reinforce a behavior, we want it to occur again. If we want to punish a behavior, we want the behavior to stop. And so positive reinforcement is giving, let's just use an example of a person. Let's say you all did really well on your last exam. So I gave you all a sticker. Maybe you all really liked stickers, right? So I'm adding something, I'm giving you something in the hopes that you will do the behavior again. I'm giving you a sticker in the hopes that you will do well on your next exam. That's kind of what we use for younger children. That positive reinforcement is really good, right? But let's say you all are college kids. You don't want stickers. Here's college students. You don't want stickers. Like, that's baloney. Let's do something else. Maybe you all did so good on this last exam that I decided to take away your next homework assignment. Now that's not going to happen. I'm going to tell you right now. But I'm taking something unpleasant away because I want you to increase a certain behavior. So I'm taking away a homework assignment so that you all will continue to do well on your exams. That's negative reinforcement. It's taking something away in the hopes that you will do the behavior again. Now, punishment. I want to decrease a behavior. Positive punishment is adding something to decrease a behavior. An example of positive punishment could be, maybe I caught you fighting with your sibling. Maybe your mom has done this. If you're an only child, maybe a cousin or another relative, right? Well, I want you to stop doing that behavior, so I'm going to give you positive punishment. Because you fought with your sibling, you have to do the dishes. I'm adding a task or something you don't like in the hopes that you will decrease a certain behavior. Now, negative punishment, this one, I'll be honest, as a nanny, when I was a nanny back in the day, this is the one I would use if I had to punish because it made me feel better. But let's say a child hits you with their toy. Oh, you're mad, right? Well, negative punishment, you want them to stop hitting you with that toy. You're going to take something away. You're going to take away that toy that they hit you with. So you're taking away something they like in the hopes that they will stop doing that bad behavior you don't want, or that behavior you don't want. In this case, I'm going to take away little Timmy's baseball bat because I don't want him to hit people with it. So those are the basics of reinforcement and punishment. Again, reinforcers increase a behavior and punishers decrease a behavior. So with that being said, how might you use operant conditioning in your own life? How has operant conditioning been used on you in the past? Maybe you think of all the times you've been punished when you were younger. You were grounded. So your mother decided to, or your mother or father decided to ground you from going outside with your friends in the hopes that you would stop doing a behavior. So they took away that social interaction so that you would stop doing a behavior. That's going to be negative punishment. Or maybe you did really well on your report card and your parent decided to take you out for a celebratory meal. Start adding something pleasant in the hopes that you'll continue performing well. These are all examples of operant conditioning. So 3 important things to know about operant conditioning is that instrumental responses can occur under stimulus control. When they mean instrumental responses, that just means operant responses. So it's also known as instrumental conditioning, but typically it's called operant conditioning, so please try not to be confused by that. I'll change it in your slide. But they can occur under stimulus control. So you can control a certain stimulus, you can control the scenarios in which these events occur. Trying to think of an example of this. Let me get back to that. Let me think on that. Operant conditioning involves choice. So this is a big differentiating factor between classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning doesn't really involve choice. It's kind of a low level of awareness. We're building associations, right? But operant conditioning involves choice because you're making a choice to do something based on its consequences. You don't necessarily have to do what is expected of you. Reinforcers are not made equal. So what's going to be rewarding for one person is not going to be rewarding for another. For example, food, we have primary and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are rewarding in and of themselves. These are things like food. We know that food sates us and meets our physiological needs. While secondary reinforcers are things like money. Money in and of itself is not reinforcing. It's reinforcing because of the associations we've made with it. So with money we've learned that we can buy things like food. So the secondary reinforcers are like a means to get to those primary reinforcers. So they're not made equal. And what's going to be reinforcing for one person may not be reinforcing for another. Observational learning. This is perhaps some of my favorite because I love social learning theory. But observational learning is just learning through watching others. So there's going to be 4 parts or stages. Attention, retention, initiation, motivation. I've put the notes in this slide to kind of define these factors for you if you want to look at it, but I'm going to explain it now. So if you see in this little picture, look at this little boy. The little boy has his attention on the people playing a game. That's the first stage. The person who is going to learn has to be paying attention to the situation. Or the person known as a model. They're modeling a behavior. That little boy, if he retains the information of what's going on in that context, he is going through that retention phase. He's kind of analyzing and he's processing it and taking it in. Well, at some point, he's going to have the initiation phase. And this is just going to be him modeling the behavior that we see under the appropriate situations in which he feels motivated. So he's going to pay attention to the situation, retain the information that's going on, decide to execute this behavior later with the proper motivation and contextual knowledge. That is social learning theory. So an example of this could be if a young girl sees her mother mowing the lawn. Well, later, that same little girl has a play lawn mower, and she is found mowing the backyard a few hours later with her little play mower. That's social learning theory. That young girl is picking up on all these contextual factors about learning and how you interact with specific objects or people. And she learned that through watching her mother, or this model that she looks up to, because that's important too. The child in this instance has to revere that figure, has to want to be like that figure. You're not going to learn from someone you don't really identify with. So that's kind of a core concept of social learning theory, and why I often tell people, have you ever heard the saying, do as I say, not as I do? Well, in psychology, like all the research says, model what you want to do, right? Because it's much easier to show people what we're doing, because they're gathering the contextual factors before we can explain it to them. Now the Bobo doll experiment. This is a fantastic study, and this was conducted by Albert Bandura. And please pardon the video, it's very old and a little dated, and Bandura can be kind of dry in explaining it. But we're looking at how children use that social learning theory to develop aggressive behaviors. And you'll see that these children not only mimicked certain behaviors, but they also progress to take them steps further. So in some creative, kind of scary way, children were able to take these aggressive impulses that they were modeled and build on them without seeing these particular behaviors. Because Bandura in this time wanted to see the effects of watching violence on television and what it could have on children's behaviors. So we had children in different groups, and the different groups watched a video on how to react with how a woman interacts with a Bobo doll. A Bobo doll is just a blow-up doll that when you hit it, it has like a sand or something at the bottom, so it pops right back up. Well, these children in the different groups, depending on the video they watched, that's the independent variable here, right? Well, one group would watch a video of the woman beating the Bobo doll, hitting it with different things, right? Kicking it, throwing it. Whereas another video would watch her interact with it very casually, not aggressively. And what they found is that the children in the group who watched the video of the woman being aggressive with the doll were more likely to aggress towards that toy later when they were interacting with it. So after they watched the video, they were allowed to be put in a space with this doll. And the doll, the children would interact with it the way they saw in the video. And then they would take it further. So watch this video and you'll get more of what I'm saying in context. But I won't watch it for the sake of time on this slide. So here at the end of our lecture, we're going to have some practice questions. I really want you to go through these. I'll go through like one or two of them, but there are 7. Excuse me. I apologize for that, folks. There are 7 of them that you can look through. But I'll explain some of them because this is so unbelievably important, especially if you go on to learn about developmental psychology in Psych 241. This is going to be a large component of how people develop, and learning is so important because we do it every day with different means. So let's do this first example. And if you feel comfortable enough, or if you would like to, you can copy and paste these from the slide into a Word document and send them to me and ask me, like, hey, Miss Elizabeth, am I on the right track with this? I just want to make sure I understand these concepts. So For the first one, let's identify all the factors of classical conditioning. So every time someone flushes a toilet in your house, the shower becomes very hot or cold and causes you to jump back. Over time, you jump back after hearing the flush, even before the water temperature changes. Now, these questions are likely going to be on the test. Not exactly, but in some form. So make sure you can understand how these break down with classical conditioning. That's why I'm having you do that advertising assignment as well. But let's get back into this. So what is our unconditioned stimulus? What is the thing that kind of starts this whole process? What is going to cause a natural reaction without any learning? Well, that's kind of hard to pick out first. Let's look at the unconditioned response. That might help us find the unconditioned stimulus. So what is a natural response to something we see in this scenario? Jumping back. Jumping back is going to be our unconditioned response. Where jumping back is a response to something. But to what? Unconditioned. What do we initially jump back from? The hot or the cold water. That hot or cold water temperature is going to cause us to jump back. So now we have our unconditioned stimulus of the hot or cold water and our unconditioned response to the jumping back. It says over time, you jump back after hearing the flush. So we know that the flush has been paired repeatedly with that hot or cold temperature. So the flush is going to be our conditioned stimulus, even before the water temperature changes. So then our conditioned response is to jump back at the sound of the flush. Let's do another one to make sure we're kind of walking through this, okay? You eat a new food and then get sick because of the flu. However, you develop a dislike for the food and feel nauseated whenever you smell it. So note that this is not a repeated pairing, it is one pairing, and classical conditioning may occur with one pairing. So let's say you're sick because of the flu. That is going to be our unconditioned stimulus and our unconditioned response. So our unconditioned stimulus is the flu, and our unconditioned response is those feelings of sickness and nausea. Well, it just so happened that you ate a new food, so that new food is going to be paired with your flu, right? So that is the conditioned stimulus. We've paired it to that flu and the experience of being sick. So that food, that conditioned stimulus, will now yield the same response as our sickness, as our flu. So you'll feel nauseated when you eat the food. The conditioned stimulus is the food, the conditioned response is the sickness. So go through these and the ones on this page and see how you can answer these. If you find it really difficult to pick out these questions, then that definitely is a signal of a red flag that you need to reread the text or come and talk to me either in person, over the phone, or email, and we can go through it. I'm always available to help you all if you need it, so make sure you utilize that when you can. I hope you all have a wonderful week. And yes, again, I'm spending 2 weeks on this concept because it's a little more difficult than others, and I find it rather interesting. So, have a great week and enjoy learning about learning.